After the Titanic, if there was ever a ship the world truly trusted, it was the MV Explorer, a cruise ship built specifically for the frozen seas, where ordinary vessels wouldn't even dare to sail. This was the same ship that for years successfully carried out multiple rescue missions in Antarctica, earning it the proud title of the Conqueror of Ice. But on the night of November 23, 2007, in the icy waters of the Southern Ocean, something happened that would shock the entire world. Welcome, viewers, you're watching The Winning Mind. Today we'll talk about the ship that people trusted the same way they once trusted the Titanic, but fate had a very different ending in store for it. Back in the 1960s, traveling to Antarctica by sea was considered nearly impossible. Towering icebergs, freezing winds, and monstrous waves, together they made it a voyage of death. But a Swedish-American businessman named Erik Lindblad decided to take that danger as a challenge. He dreamed that one day humans too would be able to step into the white wilderness of Antarctica. And to make that dream real, a very special ship began to take shape. This was no ordinary cruise ship. It was 240 feet long, weighing over 2,300 tons. Its name, Lindblad Explorer. It was the first cruise ship ever designed specifically for icy waters. It didn't need an icebreaker or an escort vessel, because it was an Ice Class 1A ship, strong enough to crush through ice with its own weight. Built for 104 passengers and 54 crew members, the ship was a floating symbol of comfort and luxury. Its double-layered steel hull protected it from the crushing pressure of ice, and soon after its launch it became world-famous. Years passed, ownership changed hands, and in 2004, a Canadian company called Gap Adventures bought the ship and gave it a new name, MV Explorer. No one could have imagined that this name would one day be written in the pages of tragedy, because by 2007, the ship had already completed 250 successful Antarctic voyages. But that very year, in November, it set out on a journey from which it would never return. November 11, 2007, the MV Explorer departed from Ushuaia, Argentina, its destination, Antarctica. The route included stops at the Falkland Islands and South Georgia Island. With 100 passengers and 54 crew members aboard, everyone was excited, chasing yet another frozen dream. The first few days were calm. The sea was still. The skies were clear. No one knew that this calm was just the silence before the storm. The ship's captain, Bengt Weeman, a 49-year-old veteran with decades of experience sailing through icy waters, was leading the expedition. But Antarctica is a land of unpredictability, where the weather changes faster than the wind itself. At the start of the voyage, Captain Weeman made an unusual decision. He chose to abandon the traditional route and take a new one, hoping it would mean less ice and a smoother passage. For the first 10 days, everything went perfectly. But on the evening of November 22nd, as the sun dipped into the horizon, the MV Explorer entered a region where the ice was far thicker than expected. The captain announced to the passengers, "We're now surrounded by ice. You'll hear the sound of ice breaking beneath the hull, but there's no need to panic." He reduced the speed to just 5 knots. The ship crept forward slowly, as the thin layers of ice gave way to thicker ones. And then, darkness fell, the horizon disappeared into fog. At around 10 p.m., a loud crash echoed through the hull, and within seconds, the ship came to a sudden halt, jarring stop. At first, everything was silent. No one understood what had just happened. But moments later, it became clear. The MV Explorer had collided with a massive block of ice, forcing it to halt in the middle of the frozen sea. Because the captain had already warned everyone that the sound of ice striking the hull was normal, most passengers dismissed the loud crash, rolled over in their bunks, and went back to sleep. A short while later, Captain Bengt Weeman managed to restart the engines. The ship began moving again, cutting its way through the chunks of ice as if nothing had happened. But what no one knew was that a small crack had formed below the waterline. And through that narrow opening, the icy water had started to seep in, first in tiny trickles, then in a steady, unstoppable flow. The sleeping passengers woke up when cold water began to flood into their cabins. The lower decks were the first to be hit, and within minutes, chaos and panic spread everywhere. People ran frantically through the corridors, some trying to grab their belongings, others just running for their lives. Water was pouring in from every direction, through door seams, vents, and even the smallest gaps in the walls. When the captain rushed back to the control room, the scene was terrifying. Water was rising fast. Several cabins were already completely submerged. At first he hoped the damage was limited, but as the pressure increased, he realized the truth. The fight to save the ship was over. He immediately gave the order, "All passengers, abandon ship. Get to the lifeboats now." Crew members ran in every direction. launching the lifeboats into the freezing water. The ship was already listing to one side, but everyone was doing their best to save as many lives as possible. The Explorer was just 46 kilometers from its destination, yet in this condition reaching it was impossible. And then came the cruelest challenge of all, the cold. In the Antarctic night, the temperature had dropped below freezing. Staying too long in the lifeboats could turn survival itself into a deadly gamble. That's why the captain quickly began sending out SOS signals to nearby ships. The distress call was received by the National Geographic Endeavour and another vessel named Nord-Norge. But both were far away, and immediate rescue seemed out of reach. Meanwhile, water began flooding into the engine room, the very heart of the ship, where the power systems and machinery were located. Once that section filled, the lights went out, the engines died, and an eerie silence enveloped the sea. Now, the MV Explorer drifted alone in total darkness, lost in the frozen heart of the Antarctic Ocean, helpless, silent, and surrounded by ice. Now the MV Explorer stood completely still, its engines dead, its fate left to the mercy of the freezing Antarctic waves. For the captain, this was a moment of decision. While he was focused on evacuating the passengers, another fear haunted him. If the engines couldn't be restarted, strong winds could push the ship back into the deadly ice field it had just escaped from. With no electricity left, the crew tried to restart the engines manually. After several failed attempts, the engines finally sputtered to life, a faint rumble, but enough to spark a glimmer of hope. For a brief moment, the ship was alive again. The crew quickly accelerated the evacuation. 4 lifeboats were prepared, and one by one, the passengers began descending into the freezing, merciless waters. For a while, the captain and a few brave crew members fought to keep the ship stable, but fate had other plans. Within minutes, the engines went silent once more, and water began to pour rapidly into the lower decks. There was no turning back now. Captain Bengt Weeman took one last look at his beloved ship, and then, along with his crew, he too boarded a lifeboat. More than 150 people now floated in small rafts on the icy, dark and endless sea, shivering, terrified, and praying for rescue. The bone-chilling winds tested every ounce of their endurance and hope. Then, after 4 long hours, a faint light appeared on the distant horizon. It was the ship that had received the SOS, the Nord-Norge. Rescue had finally arrived. Every passenger and crew member was brought to safety. But for the MV Explorer, the journey was over forever. In the investigation that followed, experts concluded that the tragedy was the result of a misjudgment. The captain had mistaken an area of hard, old ice for newer, softer ice, and within seconds, that mistake tore open the ship's steel hull. Today, the wreck of the MV Explorer lies about 25 miles southeast of Penguin Island, resting 2,300 meters beneath the ocean's surface, forever buried in the icy depths. It remains there still, a silent witness beneath the frozen waves, reminding us just how small human power truly is in the face of nature.